Good morning, everybody. We are thrilled to be here. I'm Dave Shelburne, my daughter's Katrina. She was supposed to give this introduction, but unfortunately she's at the dorm room and sick. And I hear that's been going around a little bit. But anyway, so I'm gonna do Katrina's introduction. I just want to say, I watched that marathon live. Sorry, Dave, in the spirit of full disclosure, I didn't know Dave at the time. I was rooting for Alberta. Because he was the local Boston guy. But that was such a great race. And every time I see it, I go, yeah, you're going to win this time. But, so I'm just going to read Katrina's speech that she was going to give. And where she says, my name is Kat Shelburne, you know that. And I'm very excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Dick Beardsley. There have been 120 Boston marathons since 1897. It's arguably the most famous marathon in the world. And this one, in 1982, is the most famous of all. It's now called the Jewel in the Sun because it was sunny and 82 degrees today, that day. Also, still, of the 124 Boston marathons, is the closest first, second place men's finish of all time. And to put that in perspective, so that was run 34 years ago. Do you think there's been any advances in training and nutrition in the last 34 years? I've gone and watched almost every one of the marathons since then, and I was at the one last April. Dick's time here was 4 minutes faster than the winner from Ethiopia last year. 4 minutes faster. Put that in perspective. If you Google the marathon times, you'll see that Dick's time in 1982 was faster than the last four of the last five Boston Marathon finishers, except for one. And that was 16 seconds faster than Dick's time. So that was an epic performance. Dick is one of the most famous marathoners of all time. This is the golden age of U.S. distance running in the 80s. And two books have even been written about him. One book about Alberta and Dick together. But to Katrina, he's a great friend. Katrina's known Dick since second grade, and he is one of the most kind and most supportive friends anyone can have. Dick's become a great Dick and his wife Jeff become great friends of our family. So with that, Dick, welcome to Tilton.
Her mom's FaceTime thing, right? Is that what it's called? FaceTime? Yeah. Sorry about that, I'm not real techy. But it is an honor and privilege to be here this morning at Tilton School and to let me share a few stories with you. And you got to see this 1982 Boston Marathon video. And as Dave mentioned, it was actually not 34 years ago, it was 35 years ago, coming up in April. And I can still remember that day like it happened this morning. Honest to goodness. I've seen that video literally thousands of times over the last 35 years, and every time I see it, it still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And every time I see it, I keep thinking, maybe this time I'll get a beat it. I'll have to watch it later on and see if the results are different. But again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you to Dave and Yvette Shelborn, like Dave said, and their family. Their son Justin and their daughter Katrina have become great friends. And a big thank you to the Valley Shoe Company for making my trip out here possible to your school. You know, when people see that video, when they look at my writing resume, they think, man, this kid from Minnesota must come out of his mother's womb with a pair of running shoes on. That I was a Minnesota State high school champion in cross country and track, went on to a major university on a full ride scholarship, on to the Olympics and so on and so forth. But for me, it was about the exact opposite. As a kid growing up in Minnesota, my whole world revolved around the outdoors. Hunting, fishing, trapping, milking cows. The thought of doing anything athletically never even really crossed my mind until I was about 17 years old, and I was just starting my junior year of high school. I'll never forget that day in early September of 1973. When I walked into my high school doors that day to start my junior year of high school, and it was like suddenly my hormones had changed, and for the first time in my life, girls started looking a lot better to me than a dead raccoon laying alongside a boy. But I was a little shy, bashful kid, and the thought of saying hi to a girl, let alone actually speaking to one, or heaven forbid actually asking one on a date, literally made me sick to my stomach. Well, wouldn't you know, that afternoon in my history class, there was a young gal sitting a couple rows in front of me that caught my eye, but I was way too bashful to say anything to her. But I was able to get her phone number from a friend of another friend that kind of knew her. I'm thinking, that's it. I'll just call her on the phone. That way I don't have to look her in the eyes when I'm talking to her. So I get home from school and I'm all excited, and I walk into the house, into the kitchen where our phone was, and wouldn't you know it, standing right next to the phone are my mom and my dad. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I can't let my mom, and especially my dad, see me talking to a girl on the phone. So I stepped by my folks and I went down into our basement where we had one other phone. I start walking towards it. Immediately I could feel my heart rate start to increase. And I'm thinking, okay, Richard, all you gotta do is pick up the phone, dial her number, and when she answers it, everything else will come naturally. But a bigger part of me was saying, you know what, Dick? It ain't gonna happen. And sure enough, I got to the phone, and it was like I was petrified. I could not pick it up. So I walked back to my little corner in the basement, and I sat there for a couple of minutes, psyching myself up. Finally, I thought, yes, Richard, you can do this. And I started walking back towards that phone. Immediately, I could feel that heart rate start to increase. Pretty soon you could see my shirt going, boom, 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 boom. I went to pick up the phone and I was sweating so bad my armpits were like Niagara Falls, honest to goodness. But I picked up the phone, I put the receiver to my ear, and I started dialing her number. Now for you young ones out there, it's called a rotary phone. That's what we had back then. And it starts to ring, and I looked at the heavens above and I'm going, God, please don't let her answer. Well, she did. And by the time she got the word hello out of her mouth, I hung the phone up. I'm thinking, kid, you loser. So I walked back to my little security corner, psyched myself up a few more minutes, and finally thought, yes, I can do this. I start walking towards the phone. Heart rate is going 100 miles an hour. I'm as nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. I go down, I pick up the phone, I put the receiver to my ear, I dial her number, I pray to God she won't answer. And this time, though, when she did, I hung it up even quicker. I'm going to be a bachelor the rest of my life. Now, I've always felt that I'm very blessed with a very positive attitude about virtually everything. But I got to admit, on my way to school the next morning, I'm feeling a little bit sorry for myself, kind of hanging my head. And I walk back through that same high school door I did the day before, and I get about 30 feet down the hallway, and I hear all this commotion off to my left. And I look over, and there were the jocks. We had a railing in our school that we called the jock railing. It led down to our gymnasium. And in the morning before classes would start, a lot of the guys that were real good at sports would hang out along that railing wearing their high school summer jacket, looking real cool. I always ignored them because I wasn't one of them. But this morning, as I looked over and I saw all the jocks wearing their leather jackets, what I saw even more were all the girls hanging around them. I'm thinking, that's it. All I got to do is earn myself a leather jacket and the chicks will come to me. So right then and there, I decided I'm going out for football. Oh, look at me. I'm 6 foot tall, weigh 134 pounds soaking wet, but I was bound and determined I was going to be a football player. I will never forget that very first day of practice. My gym teacher was our high school football coach. He tried for 10 minutes to talk me out of it, but I wouldn't listen. He goes, Beardsley will crush you like a pot can out there. He said, you turn sideways, we can't even see you. But I could not listen. So 25 of us followed Coach Schaefer around that ball field that afternoon. Ran the 50-yard line in the middle of the field with a big circle around Coach Schaefer, who's standing in the middle holding the football. He's telling us what we're going to do for practice. When all of a sudden he takes that ball and he wings it towards the end zone and he hollers, Beardsley, fumble, get the ball. So I'm thinking, boy, I got to show Coach I know how to play this game. So I took off sprinting as fast as my skinny little legs would take me, and I jumped on that football, and moments later, about 20 of my teammates all piled on top of me. Goodness. When I fought my way out of that massive humanity, got out of that pile of guys, my helmet was uncrooked, my shoulder pads were sticking out, my football pants were down to my ankles, and at that point I'm thinking, there is not a girl alive that is worth going through this. And I quit. I walked off the field. My entire football career from start to finish lasted 43 and a half minutes. That was it. So here I was, a kid, 17 years old. I never had a date with a girl. Couldn't even talk to one on the phone. And now, I don't last an hour on the football team. What little self-esteem I had pretty much went right down the drain. But sometimes, kids, as you will find out, that what we perceive as our biggest disappointments or failures sometimes can turn out to be a great blessing and be one of the best things that ever happens to you. And that's the way it was for me. Because a couple of days later, a buddy of mine said, Beards, I heard you flop that football. You're going out for the cross-country team. I didn't even know what cross-country was. I'd never heard of it. I had two questions. First being, what is cross-country? Oh, when he told me we ran up and down the hills through the woods and jumping over logs and creeks, I thought, well, that sounds like it might be kind of fun. But my second more important question was, do they tackle you with cross-country running? And when he said no, I thought, I'm going out. So the following Monday, I show up for my very first day of practice. I pull into my high school parking lot, my little rusted out pickup truck, 6:30 in the morning. I'm all excited, nobody's even there yet. I park my truck, and pretty soon all the other guys on the team, they pull in. They're getting out of their vehicles, and they got these fancy shoes on, these fancy colored, multicolored sweatsuits, and I'm looking at what I'm wearing. And I'm thinking, I am not getting out of my truck. So slowly but surely, I slid down to where eventually I was laying horizontal on the floorboard of my pickup, thinking nobody's going to see me over here. Well, the problem is when you're from a little town, everybody knows what you drive. And pretty soon I had about 30 eyeballs looking through my front windshield, probably still wondering to this day, why is Beardsley laying horizontal on the floorboards of his truck? So they opened up my door, and they grabbed me by my shoulders, they pulled me out, and stood me up, and when they did, they literally fell down and was laughing because of what I was wearing. Now here's what I was wearing for my very first day of cross-country. Organized running effort. I had no idea that anything was called running shoes. But I knew this much, I knew you didn't wear the shoes to go to church on Sunday to run in. So I had on a pair of these blue and black canvas rubberized type of shoe. They were the goofiest, nerdiest looking thing you'd ever seen. Now I knew this much. You better wear socks so you don't get blisters. I had on a pair of black nylon stockings that went up above my knees. Now picture that because it gets even worse. Now I knew this much. You don't wear long pants to run in. You wear shorts. Well, when I was in school, we had to wear white gym shorts for quiet class. So I'm thinking, I'll just wear those. Well, I'm digging through my dresser drawer that early Monday morning and I can't find it. I'm thinking, well, maybe my dad's got some. So I hike on down to the end of the hallway to my mom and dad's bedroom and I start digging through my dad's dresser and sure enough, I find a pair of his. The problem was, though, my dad weighed over 100 pounds more than I did. So when I put on those white gym shorts, I could get like 4 feet into them. So I took a black dress belt and cinched it up around the outside of those shorts. They were so puffed I looked like Mary Poppins. Honest to goodness. You could have dropped me from the highest building in New York City and glided down like I had a parachute on. Well, not only was my coach and teammates laughing at me, I was actually laughing at me. Well, finally our coach is up and I said, now, line up in front of the school out there on the road, we're going to do the around-the-block run. Now, I'd never run before. Oh, I chased a few cows, got through the fence home, but that was about it. But I knew this. I knew I was determined enough and stubborn enough that I could make it around the block. So our coach blows the whistle and off we go. We get down to the end of the first street, we turn left. I'm right with everybody. We get up to the next street. I turn left there. I'm still right with everybody. Now I'm thinking, we get to the next street, we turn left, back to the high school, practice is over. So we're coming up onto the next street corner, and I start leaning to the left. But they keep going straight. I'm thinking, well, they're going to run 2 blocks. Well, we get up to the next street corner. I didn't just lean left, I actually turned left. They kept going straight. At that point, it felt like somebody had their hand down my throat trying to rip my heart right out. It felt like my lungs were about ready to explode. Pretty soon, we were out of streets in town and out into the countryside, and it wasn't long after that, my teammates were so far in front of me, I could not see them. Thankfully, one of them came back to where I was struggling to put one foot in front of the other. And he says to me, Beards, follow the road you're on all the way to the end. When you get to the end, turn left. And when you get to the next road, turn left there, and it'll take you back to the high school. I came to find out later that what they called their around-the-block run was actually 3.2 miles long. Now that doesn't seem very far than today, but back then, it seemed like forever. I had to walk the last mile. I could not run. By the time I got back to my high school parking lot, all my teammates and my coach had already showered and gone home. But when I crossed that imaginary finish line, I'm thinking, wow, I don't know how far you just ran and walked it, but you made it. And I'll just bet you, Dick, I said to myself, if you work real hard, if you do what your coach told you to do, if you believe in yourself, have faith, I'll just bet you, Dick, you can get good enough to make the varsity squad, to earn the letter jacket, to get the date with the girl. My whole inspiration for running, get the date with the girl. Well, unfortunately, I was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And thank goodness, we had a JV team, or I would have been able to run any weeks at all. But I did everything my coach told me to do. I showed up on time for practice. I never complained about a workout. I ran on the weekends when I didn't have to, but I was terrible. When you're on the JV team, you don't earn the letter jacket. But that's following summer then. I didn't run track that spring, so I thought, I'm not running around a dirt road or on a football field. That just seemed too boring to me. But my goal then was, when school got out at the end of my junior year, was to run every single day that summer. And that's what I did. I was so determined and so motivated to make that varsity cross-country team. And it was exactly 1 year to the day that I came back from my senior year of high school, and we did that same around-the-block run. But this time, instead of all my teammates finishing in front of me, they all finished behind me. Now that's not saying a whole lot because we didn't have a very good team, but it showed me that if you're willing to really work and go after that dream, don't ever let yourself or anybody else tell you that it can't be done. Now saying all that, I never did qualify in Minnesota for a state meet in cross-country or track, but the seed was planted. Now a lot of people think, oh man, here's a kid, Boston Marathon, winner of other marathons, probably got a full-ride scholarship to ran for the University of Minnesota. Well, there were no scholarships. I did, however, run for part of my career for the University of Minnesota. Just probably not the one you've ever heard of. I ran for the University of Minnesota / Waseca, a very small two-year agricultural college in Waseca, Minnesota, which is now a federal prison, so it kind of tells you where I got my degree from, but that's a whole other story. But I had a coach there, Dr. John Polbrock, who's been retired for a number of years, but I'm still very close to him. One day he put his arm around my shoulder and he said, you know what, Dick, I really believe you can become as good of a runner as you want to be. And I never, ever forgot that. And because of my running improving a bit, I went out and got a partial scholarship and ran at South Dakota State University. The Jackrabbits. Right, Katrina? The Jackrabbits. Got a really good girls basketball team out there. Anyhow, I ran there for 1 semester. The fall in 1878. In fact, we were runner-up national champions in Division II cross country. But I met a young gal out there in college, and we fell in love, and we decided we were going to get married. And so I thought, well, I got a 2-year degree in ag, and I was just going to go home and farm and milk cows anyhow. And I'm going to get married now, so that's it. After that first semester, I went back home, quit running, was milking cows, getting ready to get married. And then one morning, afternoon I should say, I'm getting ready to go out to do my chores, but I had a little extra time. So I got the mail out of the mailbox, and I brought it back into our kitchen table, and I threw the mail on there. And as I'm standing in my dirty old coveralls, getting ready to go do my milking chores, I happened to see one of my runners' magazines had come. I had a little time, I paged through it, and all of a sudden I saw a little story there about what it took to qualify for the 1980 Olympic Marathon trials. You had to run 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 56 seconds. My best marathon, which I'd run a couple of them in college, my best marathon, though, at that point, was almost 12 minutes slower than that. And then I remember what Coach Fulbright said about, Dick, I really believe you become as good a runner as you want to be. And I thought, I got to at least try. So the next morning, after I got to those chores, I took off to the big city of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I found a little one-room apartment on the outskirts of the Twin Cities, $400 a month. But I thought I'll do whatever it takes. If I have to do odds and ends, but I'm going to train as hard as I can. I remember telling my dad, and he thought I was nuts. And it was a struggle. But I trained at least twice, sometimes 3 times a day. At the end of the month when it came time to pay the rent, honest to goodness, it was a struggle. I had to look up some days under the pillows and the cushions for extra nickels, dimes, and quarters, just so I could put another gallon of milk or a loaf of bread in my pantry. The one pair of running shoes I had, they were so worn out I had to duct tape them together. But I had no extra money to buy them. And I knew if I went to my mom or my dad, especially my dad, and said, Dad, can I borrow 50 bucks to get a new pair of running shoes? I knew what the answer was going to be. It was going to be a big fat no. You see, my dad was waiting for me to fail so he could tell me I told you so. Now, saying that, my dad would become one of my biggest boosters ever. But at that time, he was way against it. And then I got wind of a big sporting goods convention coming to a big hotel in Minneapolis. All the major running shoe companies were going to be there. I'm thinking, man, I'm going to go see if I can get myself a sponsorship. Now, that's pretty big doings, pretty big dreams for a kid that was about an average runner at best at the time. So I remember I got my little non-electric typewriter and I did that kind of typing with 2 fingers, a running and resume about myself. I double and triple spaced it so it would fill a whole page. And then 2 weeks later, I went to this big hotel in Minneapolis. I walked in the door, I asked where the convention was, and the gal pointed me down there. And as I walked through the convention doors, there was a security guard on both sides. And as I'm walking through, one of the gentlemen stops me. He says, Sir, he says, where's your button with your name on it? I said, jeepers, guys, I don't have a button with my name on it. I don't have a button with my name on it. I'm just here to see if I can get a shoe sponsor. He said, sorry, sir, but you're not allowed in here. It's not open to the public. I said, you know what, guys? I'll be back in about 10 minutes, and I continued walking. They go, sir, you need to stop now. And I picked up my case, and I walked down an aisle where I thought he wouldn't be able to find me. Well, pretty soon, I felt this vice grip type of hand on my neck. And I looked up like this. I'm like looking at the Jolly Green Giant. The guy was so big. And he grabbed me by the back of the neck, and he took me out to the door, and he says, sir, you're not allowed in here. And he kicked me out. So I'm standing outside this huge complex. I'm thinking, there's got to be another way into this building. So I walked all the way around. Every door I came through, I pulled on it. Locked, locked, locked. I get down to the second to last door. I go up to it, I give it a big aim, locked tighter in the trunk. I start walking back towards the one last door. And I get halfway towards it. And I stop and I'm thinking, why bother? It's going to be locked anyhow. And I turned around and hung my head and walked the other direction back around I just had come. And I got about 10 feet from the door and I turned back around and I looked at that door and I thought, why not? That's the question. Why not at least go give it a try? So I walked back over that door, I grabbed the handle, I gave it a big jerk, and that door opened and it cooped me right here in the head. I got one of those little unicorn bumps sticking out of my head, but at this point, I could see through the next unlocked set of doors that went right into the convention. And I was excited, I opened up that door, I took 2 steps in, and there it was, the Jolly Green Giant security man there. Also, knowing I wasn't going to give up so easy, took his big old chompers again and put them around my neck, turned me back around, set me out the door, and he says, if I see you back in the hotel, I will call the police and have you arrested. So I walked all the way back around. I got out into the parking lot. I opened my car door, getting ready to drive back home, when I looked one last time up towards the front of the apartment, and I see this old man walking out with what looks like a button on his jacket. Now, I'll be honest with you, the first thought that went through my mind was to sneak up through the bushes and grab it off of them. But thankfully I didn't. There will be people in your lives that you will meet that you will never, ever forget. And for me, this man was one of those people. To this day, I have no idea what his last name was, but I'll never forget his first name because it said it on his big button he was wearing. It was Bob. And I went up to Bob, and I stuck my hand out, I introduced myself, I told him what I was trying to do, and I stuck my hand in my pocket, and I pulled out the last $2 bills I had on me. I said, Bob, if you're done with your butt, can I please buy it from you? Now I'm this far from him, and I'm looking at him right in the face, just waiting for him to say something. He doesn't say anything. He just shakes his head like this. And I can feel the life almost being sucked right out of me. And then he spoke and he says, no, Dick, you can't buy my book. But he said, you can have it. He says, I admire what you're trying to do. And with that, he took that button off of his jacket, he pinned it on mine, he shook my hand and wished me luck, and man, I was fired up. I had my 12 resumes, and I went through the next set of doors, and I could see on the other side, there was Mr. Security Guard. My neck was still swelled up a little bit, and I thought, I'm going to shorten the finger too. So I put those 12 resumes over my mom, and I opened up the door, and I took a step in, and I looked at him, and he looked at me. He was smiling, I was smiling. I could read his mind. Man, I'm going to bust that skinny little pipsqueak. My buddy is going to see me on the 10 o'clock news tonight. And just as he's getting ready to put his big old meat hooks around my neck for a third time, I pull away my resumes and I stick my Bob button out. He knew my name wasn't Bob. I don't look like a Bob. But I had the button. I had the name. And he had to let me into that expo. And I went to every running shoe company that was there, and they were all there. And I handed them my one-page resume. I shook their hand and I said, I hope to hear from you. Thank you so much. And with that, as I walked towards another booth, most of the time I heard this crumpling of paper. And I looked back, and my little running resume was going right into the trash can. I was now down to one resume, 2 shoe companies. I'm thinking, what's it going to be? And I kind of just spun myself around, and I'll bet you don't know what shoe company I decided to go to. It was New Balance Shoe Company. I'll never forget the guy's name. As long as I live, he's no longer there, hasn't been there a long time, but his name was Hal the Waldorf. And I went up to Hal, and I stuck my hand out, gave my resume, and you know what, kids? He took the time to look at it. And then he says to me, I'll be honest with you, Dick, the times you run at various distances aren't real fast. But he says you are improving, which is good, but he says, you know what I really like about your resume is the goals that you have set for yourself. I really like seeing that from a young person. And with that, he asked me, he says, Dick, what size shoe do you wear? And honest to goodness, my honest to goodness response was, what size you got? Honest to goodness, I was ready to come out my hand and ready to shoot fit. I said, well, about a size 9. And he reached underneath the table and pulled out a pair of New Balance 620s. Now, back in 1979, they sold for about $65, which was unheard of back then for a pair of running shoes. He says, Dick, why don't you try them on? So I put them on. He says, Dick, why don't you run up and down the hall here? See how you like them. So I'm running down the hallway and I see the exit sign. And I'm thinking, man, you right out that door with a brand new pair of shoes. But of course I didn't do that. And I came back and I took the shoes off. I put it in the box and set them on his table. And I said, this is a Waldorf. These are the nicest running shoes I ever had in my life. And I absolutely meant it. He said, Dick, how would you like it? I said, oh my gosh. I said, I would love it. I said, I can't afford a pair of shoes like this. He said, no, Dick, I don't mean you have to buy them. You can have these. And when I get back to Boston, where our world headquarters are, I'll see if I can put your little pack of things together, see if I can get you hooked up with one of our running coaches there. And with that, he shook my hand, he handed me that pair of shoes, and I walked out of that convention hall. My feet were not touching the ground. About 10 days later, I had just come back from an afternoon workout, and my park manager called me. She says, Dick, there's a big old box down here. It says New Balance all over it. I couldn't get down there quick enough. I got this big old box. It was so big I had to turn it sideways to get it through my door. I took it into my little living area, and I opened up that box, and inside there were 8 or 10 pair of running shoes. There were shorts and singlets and warm-up suits and caps and socks. And I sat there and cried as a little baby. Not because I got a bunch of gear I didn't have to pay for, but because somebody besides Beardsley believed in what I was trying to do. And the next morning when I got up and I put on that new pair of shoes and those new shorts and a shirt and I went out for a run, I had a giddy up in my step I never ever had before. Just that in itself took my running to a level that I never ever, at that point, ever thought I'd be able to perhaps attain. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to do whatever I can to help promote their products to the best of my ability because they're giving me an opportunity when nobody else would. 6 months later, I get a call from a guy named Jim Davis. Jim Davis and his wife Ann bought that company in 1872. He's the owner. He calls me up and he says, Dickie. I always call him Dickie. Dickie, we love what you're doing for us back there in Minnesota. We're getting good word from our reps and everything. He says, listen, keep up the good work. We're going to keep sending you the gear when you need it, but you know what? We'd like to give you a $500 a month stipend. I'm thinking $500 a month? That leaves me, after rent, $100 left over. I felt like I was the richest kid in the world at that point. 6 months later, they bumped it up to $1,000. And then a little less than 2.5 years after I snuck into that convention hall, I signed a deal with them where I was making 6 figures, doing something I absolutely loved to do. Now, I don't show you that story to make it sound like I'm some this great runner or I got this great contract. I tell you this story because you will find out when you get out of Tilton and go on to college. And when you get out of college and start looking for a job, you're going to knock on a lot of doors. And a lot of those doors are going to get slammed into your face. And it's going to get discouraging. And you're going to want to give up. But I promise you this. When somebody opens that door, you stick your foot in it. And you greet them with enthusiasm and a smile on your face. And you don't let them close that door on you. And then once they do open that door, you get in there and you do the job to the best of your ability. That relationship I made with New Balance in 1979 is stronger today than it's ever been. Can I run a 2-way marathon anymore? I can't dream a 2-way marathon anymore. And there were moments when it would have been easy for them to have washed their hands from me. That didn't happen. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that when I graduated from high school in May of 1875, that a short 7 years later I'd be standing in that little town of Hopkinton, Massachusetts, not all that far from here, getting ready for the greatest foot race in the world, the Boston Marathon. 35 years it will be this coming April. I can remember it as I said earlier like yesterday. Some of you saw that race, but I remember on the video. I don't think you maybe saw it. A little behind here if you are. But I still remember that race. Back then the race started at 12 noon and I'm standing on the very front row. And the starter puts up his pistol and he hollers, 1 minute! And I look to my right and 2 guys down from me is Alberto Salazar, the world record holder. He'd never been beaten. I look to my left. There was a guy that I worshipped as a young runner, Bill Rogers. He'd won the Boston Marathon not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. A little further down that front row was Frank Shorter, the gold medalist of the United States in the Olympic Marathon. I'm looking up and down this front row, seeing Olympians and world-class athletes from around the globe together. What the heck am I doing on the same start line with these guys? But by the time I went in this year and got on the other side, I thought, no, Dick, you deserve to be here as much as anybody else because you have worked so hard for this. It's so easy to get intimidated by what you read or what you see or what you hear, whether it be in sports, in school, in a job, But if you know you put in the time and put in the work, don't for 1 second believe that you don't belong on that so-called starting line. And with that, the gun went off and Salazar shot out of there like he was shot from a rocket. I was right along his side. We went through the first mile of that 26.2-mile race in 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And I was hanging on for dear life. And let me tell you, hanging on when you still got 25.2 miles to go. That is not a good thing to be feeling like. But I did. Thinking I was going to be fine. And I hit mile 2. I felt worse than I did at mile 1. But again, I thought, you're just a little nervous. You'll be fine. Hang in there. When I hit mile 3, the first thought that crossed my mind, and I'm one of the most positive people you ever meet, but the first thought that crossed my mind, I felt so bad, was to drop out. Make up some cockamamie excuse that everybody would have believed. Do you know how different my life would be today if I had taken that easy route out and dropped out? I probably wouldn't be here. It's those moments in our lives that every one of us will face some multiple times when we don't think we can take another step forward. But we do. And then we take another one after that, and another one. And I thought, dude, you can't drop out. You worked too hard for this. I hit mile 4. I didn't feel any better. But I didn't feel any worse. And at that point, that was a huge confidence builder for me. Finally, by about 5 miles, I'm thinking, oh, I'm feeling pretty good today. That day, there was 1.5 million spectators lining the streets. And that lead group I was in, as each mile went by, I got down to less and less and less until we got to the 17-mile point, and there was 1 or 2 runners left in that lead group. Salazar, the world record holder, and as the Boston Globe had dubbed me the day before in the newspaper, Dick Beardsley, a country bumpkin from Minnesota. Nobody gave me, or for that matter, anyone else, much of a chance against Salazar. And my coach, Bill Squires, told me, he says, Dickie, if you're in that lead group or close to it, when you get to 17 miles, you take that right-hand turn on Commonwealth Avenue. And over the next 4 miles, there's 4 sets of hills, the last one being the infamous Heartbreak Hill. He says, when you get to those hills, I want you to run up them as hard as you can. And when you get to the top and it comes down the other side, I want you to run even harder. So like a good soldier following his commander, I did that first hill and I tried to shake Salazar, but nothing happened. Second hill, same thing. Third hill, same. Finally, I'm at the bottom of Heartbreak Hill, running up almost that mile-long heat grade, running it as hard as I could. I get to the top, but I went like this, and he was right on my back left pocket. I came down the long, gradual downhill on the backside. Literally felt like I was doing a 100-meter sprint. I got to the bottom where it flattened out, and I didn't have to look back to see if he was still there. He was so close I could hear him breathing. At that point, I could no longer feel my legs. The thought of having to run 5 more miles at the pace we were running or faster, I was almost making me sick to my stomach. But I knew this. I knew no matter how bad I was hurt, I could suck it up enough to go 1 more mile. And the good Lord gave us that incredible gift between our ears called the brain, and it is some powerful stuff. And my brain was able to convince my body that, all you got to do is run 1 more mile and you're going to win this race. Next thing I know, I get to the 22nd mile. Still had that little bit of lead. Okay, get 1 more mile. I get to the 23rd, same thing. 24th, same thing. And then as long as I live, I will never forget what I saw next. In front of me on that road in blue and gold paint, it said 25.2 miles, and right below that it said 1 mile to go. At that point, I got so weak-kneed and rubber-legged, I honestly did not know if I'd be able to take another step. At that point, for some reason, tears just started streaming down my cheeks. At that point, for some reason, I flashed back to that day in May of 1975 when I walked out my high school stage. The first one in my family to get a high school diploma. And I walked out to where my mom and dad were sitting, and my dad, who had an 8th grade education, was crying. I handed my dad my diploma, and he handed me an envelope, and he said to me, Dee, graduation gift from your mom and I. And I opened it up. And it said, this is good for round-trip airfare to the Boston Marathon. Maybe someday you'll want to run it. Love, Mom, and Dad. Here I was not only running it, but I was winning it. And I knew my mom and dad were back home in Minnesota watching it on television. Nothing to get you, got to get your mind off your mom and dad. Think about something else, anything. I finally got back to a terrible blind date I was on. I knew that was going to come in handy someday. And it did. I got my mind off my mom and dad, back into the race. And with about 900 meters to go, I had the biggest lead I'd had all day, an arm length and a half. I knew Sullivan didn't have a great finishing kick, but he had a lot better one than I had. And at that point, I pushed like never before. And as I pushed up with my right leg, I got the biggest Charlie horse in my right hamstring. Alberta went flying by me like I was standing still. 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. It went going almost a 100-meter lead. But I learned more about myself in those last 2 minutes of that race that has enabled me to get through way, way more difficult things in my life than that 1882 Boston Marathon. And what I learned on those streets 35 years ago is that no matter how difficult the situation you're in is, no matter how high that so-called mountain is to climb, is that you never, ever give up. As long as you're moving forward towards that so-called finish line, there's always that hope. It's about believing in yourself. It's about dedication and commitment. It's about having faith. It's about being in the right place at the right time. And as Alberta continued to get further ahead of me, I'm running along the right-hand side the best I can, trying to get that knot out. The crowd moved back to let me come by, and as they did, I was happened to be in the right place at the right time. And my right foot came down into a big old pothole. I hit that pothole, I stumbled and Perker fell. But when I Perker fell, it snapped my right hamstring. Not snapped it, but it snapped the knot. Right out. No, I had my stride back. But now we're down to like 600 meters to go. And I thought, Richard, if you get second place and give it your very, very best, you can hold your head high. But if you give up now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. You saw the outcome. It came down to a little over 100 meters to go. I finally caught back up to him. And then it came right down to it. I just got out kicked. That day we were both fortunate to have broken the old Boston record and the American record. It was the first time 2 men had ever gone under 2 hours and 9 minutes in the same race. Alberta ran 2 hours, 8 minutes and 51 seconds. I ran 2 hours, 8 minutes and 52.6. I know. I had friends call me up. Here, you mean to tell me you couldn't make up 1.6 seconds in the race? That's 26.2 miles. But you know what? At the end of the day, I was disappointed and joyous at the same time. I went back to my room and I went through every step of every mile, and I got done analyzing that race, and I was smiling from ear to ear. Because at the end of it, analyzing that race, I knew I'd given it my very, very best. And how can you not be happy with that? Eventually, I finally retired from competitive riding. I blew my Achilles tendon this 84 Olympics, tried for the 88, didn't make the team, and then retired from that high level of training. Moved back to my Minnesota dairy farm, was going to milk a bunch of cows, raise a bunch of kids, and life was going to be grand. And it was. Until November 13th. Of 1989. I got up that Monday morning at 3:45 a.m. like I always did. I walked out of my house, out to my barn. I milked my 70 cows. I got done with chores. I'm running back, or walking back towards the house to give my family a good morning hug and an I love you. And I got halfway between the barn and the house, and I started thinking about all the more what I thought were important things I needed to get done. I had 3 weighted loads of corn to unload. The neighbor was coming over to help me finish combining, and the weather service said a big snowstorm was due to hit the area in a couple of days. I thought, you know what? I'll tell my family I love them tonight and give them a hug when I see them in summertime. And with that, I turned around and walked down to where I had the tractor park. Big big mistake. Anytime you get the opportunity to tell the people you love that you love them, you never, ever pass on that opportunity. Because you don't know if it'll be there later on. Mine almost wasn't. I walked down to that tractor, I jumped up on that tractor, I started it up, I took the throttle and cranked her all the way down. So that engine was a hop. I jumped off my tractor, I walked to the back, and I pulled a lever. When I pulled that lever, I had a long steel shaft connected to the back of the tractor called a power takeoff. It was hooked to another piece of farm machinery. It spins at about 650 revolutions a minute. I pulled that lever, it started to spin, I turned, and the next thing I knew, I thought somebody had come up from behind me, grabbed me by my shoulders, and threw me backwards over that spinning cylinder. Next thing I know, my left leg was being wrapped around that spinning shaft. I'd taken a piece of string and wrapped it around your finger. And when it couldn't take my leg anymore, it started taking my whole body, whipping me around and around and around. Every time I came around, I tried to grab that lever, but I was always way too short of being able to reach it. And the thought of dying wasn't so scary. But the thought of not seeing my family again was unbearable. I could feel myself starting to lose consciousness. As soon as that happened, it would be all over. Then on this very cold, gray November morning, honest to goodness, all of a sudden it got so light out here, it was like looking at the sun times 100. Where it felt like I was spinning around like a fast top, now I felt like it was in super slow motion. And all that noise, it was as quiet as the inside of a library. Was I having a near-death experience? It's all I can tell you it must have been. And with that, I remember coming around one last time and throwing out that hand of mine, my left arm. And it was like God made it go just enough to get my fingers on that lever. When I closed my eyes, I could still feel that my fingers sliding off. And I heard 3 words. And if I faith and believed it was from God, it was flick your wrist. To this day, I have no recollection how I got unwrapped out of that tangled-less machinery. But the next thing I do recall is I'm standing next to my tractor, buck naked. Well, I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm even hurt. I'm just thinking, you goofball, Richard, you forgot to put your clothes on this morning. You better go to the house before the neighbor gets here. Obviously, I was in shock. I tried to take a step toward the house, and I face planted into the frozen ground, and I knew something was desperately wrong with me because my left foot was sticking in my left ear, and I'm not that flexible. At that point, I could hardly breathe. My head looked like it was the size of a pumpkin. I came to find out later I had all kinds of head contusions, broke all the ribs in my right side, punctured my right lung, broke my right arm, had a piece of steel driven into my chest, and my left leg was almost torn off. But I had incredible doctors and nurses and surgeons and physical therapists and people I didn't even know. And they were able to save my leg not once but twice after a bad infection set in. And I survived. I even got back to running a little bit again. Life was back to being pretty good for the next 2 years. And then I'm coming home from a little R&R away from the cows. I'm 30 miles home before I get back home to the farm, when a lady runs a stop sign on a country road and T-bones my car, totals it out, breaks my back. In the hospital, more surgery. But I survived. I even got back to running a little bit again. Life was going good. Until that following January. When I'm running down the street in Fargo, North Dakota, and I'm sure you mentioned where I'm from, you know. That's how we talk up there. I'm running down the street in Fargo, North Dakota, and I get hit by a truck. They find me laying in the snowbank. Back in the hospital, more surgeries, but I survived. I even got back to running a little bit again. Life was back to pretty much normal. Until that spring. I'm hiking in Lake Bemidji Park, State Park up by where I live, with my young son at the time, Andy, and a little buddy of his. They were just little kids. I'm hiking up this little trail on this big steep embankment. Luckily, they're about 20 meters behind. It had been raining for a couple of days, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I get almost to the very top. I take the next step, and this big chunk of ground breaks away, and I fall off a cliff. I'm laying on the shore Lake Ridgey, and I can't move. I'm thinking I might be paralyzed. But I survived. I even once accidentally super glued my eye shut, and I didn't go into that. But honestly, through it all, I never questioned God or anybody else. Why is this happening to me? But people would say to me, my goodness, Beardsley, if you didn't have bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all. But I never, ever, honestly, and I'm being honest to God's truth with you, never, ever looked at it like that. But you can take all of those things that happen. The farm accident, the car accident, the getting hit by the truck, falling off a cliff, super glued my eye shut, 20-some surgeries to put my body all back together. You can take all of those things, put them into a big mixing bowl, drink it down, and it pales to what happened a short time later. As a kid growing up, I was never in any trouble, didn't do drugs, didn't drink, didn't smoke. I'm a loving husband to my wife Jill. I'm a loving dad to our boys Matthew, Christopher, and Andrew. And I'm a drug addict. There's really no difference between me and somebody shooting heroin into their veins, or doing crack or meth. My addiction was to narcotic, opiate painkillers. People say to me over the years, oh, kid, it wasn't your fault, it's those doctors. Baloney. Every doctor I got a prescription from told me the dangers of being on it for too long. Now, one of them forced me to take it. If it can happen to me, don't for 1 second think it can never happen to any of you. Because with this disease, it doesn't matter if you live in a big house in the best part of town or a little shack on the wrong side of the tracks. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have. There are no racial barriers. There is nothing other than it can attack, and it can be devastating. I did things I couldn't even imagine thinking about doing, let alone actually do. My dad, I was his only son. He became my biggest supporter with my running, even though in the beginning he was questioning why. He became my best friend. And then my dad got diagnosed with cancer, pancreatic cancer. I went to be with him. I was about out of pills. So one night when everybody was sleeping, I thought, oh, my dad's in a lot of pain. I stepped into their medicine cabinet, and I took a whole bottle, 100 count, of Vicodin extra strength. I'm thinking, oh, my dad doesn't need it. He's in the hospital. All he's got to do is push the little button, they'll come and give him pain medicine. But you know what? See, that's what happens when you become an addict. You think you care about other people, but you don't. All you care about is yourself. My dad doesn't need it. He's got that button, of course. He's in the hospital. But what about when they sent my dad home for hospice care so he could die in the peacefulness of his own home? And when that cancer started going not only through his pancreas, but into his liver and into his bones, I can only imagine when my dad was withering in pain, and he asked my mom to go get him some pain medicine, and she went to that cabinet, and it was gone. Because of my selfishness. I then started doctor shopping. I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, not the other one knowing about me. You can't do that now because everything's computerized. And then when I couldn't find any more doctors to give me prescriptions, I started doing something I never dreamed about doing, let alone actually do. I never stolen as much as a piece of bubble gum. I'd never been in any trouble in my life. I started to forge my own prescriptions. I knew I could go to prison. I knew I could lose everything I never worked for in my life, but all that mattered at that time was to get the drugs, take the drugs, and make sure I didn't get caught. What I'm telling you about this part of my life, it barely skims the surface. When I speak at a drug treatment center somewhere around the country, just that part of my life takes a good hour. By August of 1996, I was taking a cocktail of Valium, Percocet, and Demerol. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It was over a period of about 3.5, 4 years. But by August of 1996, I was taking a cocktail of Valium, Percocet, and Demerol, 80 to 90 pills a day. And I didn't die is an absolute miracle. But what's even a bigger miracle, and I thank God every single day, is that I didn't kill some innocent family. Do you know how many times I was driving down a Minnesota highway, barely able to keep my eyes open? How easy it would have been for me to have passed out, going across that center line, and run into some innocent family? It never happened, but it very easily could have. And then thankfully, on September 30th of 1996, I got caught. And I knew I was in a lot of trouble, but I was so blessed and so thankful that I was still alive. And I knew the only chance I had, if there was any chance at all to get better, was to be 100% truthful and take responsibility for my actions. That afternoon, I met with 2 federal drug agents. And I was 100% truthful with them. And at the end of over an hour of interrogation, they believed what I told them. They said, Dick, if you keep telling us the truth, we'll do everything we can to keep you from going to prison, but this will be your one and only pony ride. And with that, they took me to the hospital in Fargo, North Dakota, and they locked me up, not locked me up, but they put me in the psychiatric unit behind locked doors to try to help me get off this stuff. They put me on a drug called methadone. So they put heroin addicts on. I became addicted to that. They tried to wean me off the methadone, and the withdrawals were so incredibly nasty, I couldn't hardly stand it. They put me back on it and tried to wean me off it slower. The second time was even worse, so they put me on it a third time, weaned me off it slower, but sent me home, thinking maybe going through withdrawals at home will be a little bit easier. The third time was the worst. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. If a family member came and asked me a question, I was so agitated from the withdrawals, I would literally wipe their head off. If my dog came over for a pet on the head, I'd kick him in the butt. I didn't care about anything or anybody. Finally, my family loaded me on a Greyhound bus in the little town I'm from in northwest Minnesota at 7:30 on a Sunday night. I get into the bus station in downtown Minneapolis at 1:30 in the morning. A friend of mine picks me up and takes me to the University of Minnesota treatment hospital. They put me in my room and I lay there crying all night long and aching. The next morning they walked me down the hallway to where the doctor was, and the doctor told me, he says, Dick, methadone withdrawals are the worst things you can go through in your life. You're going to feel like you're going to die. You're going to wish you could die, but I promise you, Dick, we will not let you die. But the next 7 days or so, his exact words are going to be pure hell. For the next 7 days, I never slept 1 minute. I would lay in my bed at night, and the pain in my arms and my bones and legs from the withdrawal was so intense that I can honestly say to you, if I had access to a saw, I honestly believe I may have sawed off my own arms and legs. It would have had to felt better. In the morning when I was trying to get up, it was a struggle to get my legs on the outside of the bed. And to put on a clean pair of pants and a clean shirt, it seemed like it took me forever. But I never missed a meeting with my group to try to learn how to get better. And there were mornings I was so sick, I could not stand up and walk down the hallway to my group meeting. I had to crawl on my hands and my knees like a dog. And one morning I'm crawling along the hallway trying to get to my group meeting, and I blacked out. I have no idea how long I lay there, but when I woke up, I was laying in my own vomit. And I remember looking up and saying, God, please, God, here, just take me right now. Oh, please. please God help me do better. And then that actually slipped a little bit. And then the next day, a little bit more, and a little bit more after that. After I'd been there for a few weeks, I started to feel what it was like to be Dick Beardsley without those drugs in my system. And I liked how it made me feel. Has it been easy? It has been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. But it's been worth every single effort. In the last almost 20 years I've had now of sobriety from those drugs, have been some of the best years I've ever had. If I had some ups and downs, of course, that's what life's about. Every one of us has ups and downs. I never thought I'd ever face a bigger challenge. Until a little over a year ago. My oldest son Andy was a great kid. He served in our armed forces in the Army. He did a tour of Iraq for a year and a half. He survived that. But when he got home, unfortunately, he suffered from post-stress disorder, PTSD. And a year ago, this past October, he took his life. He was 31 years old. He had the whole future in front of him. I talked to him this 12 hours before and he seemed fine. I remember when the police officer showed up at my home and told me what had happened. I was devastated. And I'll be honest with you, the first thought was, boy, I wish I could get my hands on a bottle of Percocet. Just take away the pain. But I knew that wasn't going to do me any good. That wasn't going to help anybody, and I knew my son Andy. That would be the last thing that he wanted. And I do know this. And if I believe in my faith, my son Andy fought a lot of demons since he came back from Iraq. He couldn't sleep without a light bulb on at night because he was scared of the dark. But now he's in a place where there's no more darkness. Only light, and that just gives me great hope. So if any of you ever have a problem with drugs, with perhaps thinking about ending your life, please seek help. There are people out there to help you, to give you what you need to get you through that crisis. And in leaving, I wanted to say this. First off, big thanks to Dave and the show board and Katrina show we feel better. And your son Justin and Balance, and to all of you and all of your school administrators for letting me come here and share a little bit of my life story. And no matter how bad you think it might be, always hold hope that tomorrow is going to be better. And there's 4 things I try to do every single morning when I wake up. And it's helped me through some difficult moments in my life, and I'd like to share them with you, because perhaps they might help you, and they're very simple. When I wake in the morning, I try to wake with a smile on my face, enthusiasm in my voice, joy in my heart, and faith in my soul. Those 4 things have gotten me through some very difficult times, and they just might help you. And one last thing in closing. I got a few of my autobiography books with me. They're $20, and part of that money goes to Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is I don't want to say retired, but a Marine vet that started this Team Rubicon. And they get retired American vets from all the services, and they go around the world and our own country and help people going through difficult times from hurricanes, things like that. It's a great organization, and they also help vets. There are 22 of our American veterans a day take their lives. So we've got those, and then thank you from Balance. We've got free posters, and I'm going to be set up over by the lunchroom.
Yeah, right now, Bob.
Knowles Lobby, right afterwards here, and we got plenty of them, and if you like one of these posters, that's about a mile and a half to go up in the lead, and that's Alberto right behind me. And you know he's not wearing a jacket or a singlet there, that's just a hairy chest, that's what it is.